Let me tell you, folks, if you're interested in getting into podcasting like I was, then you need to download the free Anchor app. Now, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now, let me explain. First, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right on your phone or your computer, and Anchor will worry about distributing your podcast for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So it's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So go download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor to get started. Welcome everyone to the Black Prospector Show. What up, though, family? I want you to come in. I want you to relax and have a seat as we get ready to have our very first interview. Now, y'all know I've been excited to do this particular episode and to get the series started. If you want to know the behind kind of the story of how I got to the point where I wanted to do a show interviewing Black men, please check out the previous podcast. But the main thing I wanted to do to start all of this out was to interview my own dad. So this is going to be the very first of a couple of installments of that interview. I will release the entire interview later. I know not everyone has time to listen to an hour plus of us chopping it up, but for those that do, that will definitely be available. But in the meantime, I'm going to release a few other ones or release them out as we just go along. And I gotta say, in this first one, I had to edit it just a bit. I'm going to probably, not edit most of this, but in this first one, I had to edit it because, Dad gave out the government name and we didn't want to do that. But other than that, you're hearing it raw. You're hearing the truth. And if there's one theme that I think you're going to hear out of this intro, it's going to be the importance of truth to my father as he tells his story. Now, in this intro, you're going to be introduced to my grandfather, and I learned some things about him. And my dad brings up something that I have to say I had to go back and look up, because he said that he didn't really remember anybody having divorced parents except for himself. And so I looked it up. Shout out to blackdemographics.com. That's where everyone should go to go ahead and get some good research on the Black community. And so I went and looked at blackdemographics.com, and they actually did have some statistics going over Black men and women and the marriage rates. And I have to say, Dad was right. If we actually look at the statistics, they indicate that Black people were more likely to be married, both men and women, from 1890 until, for Black men, it ended up being the 1960s, and for Black women, it ended up being the 1970s. Now, I'm going to let some of you historians out there figure out what was going on at that time period that's also going on today, that now we have women calling in Kevin Samuels basically saying, I can't find a high value man. And you have many Black men who have totally checked out of not only, in some cases dating Black women, but in some cases even women altogether. But I really found that kind of fascinating, that even when my dad said that, I wanted to go and see, well, surely people got divorced a lot back then, right? Well, statistically, the Black family was pretty much remaining intact. And so definitely go check out the statistics yourself. And another thing that he mentions that I did not know about my grandfather, and for those brothers out there that struggle with child support, even in the 21st century, you'll hear, well, many men have been going to jail for child support for an awful long time. So you're not alone. And that's also going to be told to you today. So sit back, relax, listen in, and enjoy the very first interview of my father telling us a story. All right, let me start out by saying thank you for taking the time, definitely, to talk. And so in full disclosure for anybody that's listening to this, I'm now interviewing my father as I look to do this podcast. And the main reason that I wanted to do it is because every Black man has a story. And so that desire to hear stories by Black men and really by older people in general, really it came from you, because all I remember seeing a lot of when I was younger is you talking to older people, whether it was Miss Emma down the block. I remember we went to the nursing home to see her. And it's funny when I look back and reflect, even as a kid, whether it was, Uncle James around the corner and Aunt Gloria. And, I'm just a goofy kid riding my bike up to the library. And I'm stopping by their house, these old folks, which actually, I guess they were the same age I am now that I'm thinking about it, but I'm going there to talk to them. And so that desire, obviously, all these years later, as I get ready to turn well over a half century old, that's still there. And that's been put in by you. So I wanted to start off these series of interviews. The first one I wanted to post was an interview that I'm doing with my father. So if Dad, you could start out just saying, you could say your name, whatever part of your name you want to say, and your age, and we'll get going from there.
I'm very proud of my son. And believe it or not, he's taught me quite a bit. And I had just turned 74 this past May.
Oh, so really the first two interviews we start out with are going to be with two 74-year-old men, because Uncle Isaiah was 74 as well. So that's perfect. That is perfect. All right. Well, thank you. All right. So let us begin. Now, the first thing I was going to ask all men is simply tell me a story, but we're going to start out a little bit kind of backwards away from there. I'll just start it this way to kind of just get everything a little bit warmed up. And that is, now you just turned 74. As you reflect back over those 74 years and you look where you're at now, what do you think? I mean, and imagine you're talking, not to me, but imagine you're talking, I'll start out saying, talking to your, one of your grandsons is 22 now. What would you look back and say to your 22-year-old self as you're just now, now that you have some years to reflect and look back?
Well, just like you mentioned earlier about being around older people. Well, as a child, I was always around older people because my parents, wherever they went, we had to go. There wasn't no such thing as a babysitter. We went around older people, so we sat and listened to old folks' conversations. And believe it or not, they made sense. And then as I grew, I had everybody telling me what to do. But looking back, it was right. They were telling me the right thing, even though I didn't want to hear it. And I kind of tried to instill that you guys just pay attention to history because it, repeats itself. And old people just about tell you what they've experienced, not so much as, what really going on in the world. I've experienced it. I know it's wrong, but they can't tell you why it's wrong. They just know that they know. And that's the same thing here. There are a lot of things that I've done. I said, man, I should have listened. But I was, young fool.
Well, so let's start back when you were listening to those old folks. Where were you born? And let's not say necessarily. Well, we won't say where you born since these things are security questions now, and who knows what might start trying to hack into stuff. But we'll just say, what city kind of formed you as you were growing up? What city did you really, when you look back and say, "Yep, that was the city that I really was raised in"?
I would say Detroit for the most part. I spent the majority of my life in Detroit. Okay. And spent some in New York, some in California. California made me decide I didn't want to live there at all. But I came back to Detroit and that's it.
You mean you didn't want to live in California at all?
No, not as a child, no.
Why not?
Because my parents are divorced and I was there living with my mother and I would have had to be the president. I just couldn't deal with all the stress. And then I missed my dad, so I had to come back to Michigan. And I've been there since.
Okay. So your mom was in California, your dad was in Michigan. So, looking back, I guess we'll start out with the lessons that you learned. Did you feel like you learned more life lessons from your dad over your mom?
Yes, much more. As far as my dad, a lot I learned what not to do, basically. My mom, I learned a lot of things more or less adequate, being proper and all of that kind of stuff. Dad showed me, don't do this, don't do that. Don't do as I do as I say, do that kind of thing. And basically that was about true. Don't do what he did, but he did take care of me. But he let me do what I wanted to do for the most part too. That wasn't right. Because had I let you guys do what you wanted to do, where would you be now? And you always go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
You always said I was like strict. I don't remember being strict. I thought I was a little more. I just wanted you to do what I said do. That's it.
I think nowadays, probably many people listening would say that as a parent, you should let your kids do what they want to do.
No. You let your wife do what she wants to
do. We do have kind of some new parenting going on where parents, they are kind of parenting from if that's their personality or if that's kind of the way that they want to go, our job is just to kind of push them in that direction. They'll quote Proverbs 22:6 and train up a child in the way that they are bent. So it's kind of one of those deals where it seems like people have taken that really to the extreme, and whatever kids want to do, they do it. They do it all up in the house. They do whatever they want to do. So maybe Granddaddy was ahead of his time, huh?
No, he wasn't that far. It's a lot of things I didn't get caught doing, put it that way. Had he caught me, it would have been a different story. But once he found out I was doing it, it's like it really didn't hurt anybody. Okay, he didn't worry. So the good part about him is if there's a woman around, I can get anything I wanted out of him. Other than that, no, he was kind of strict.
Why do you think he was that way?
He was trying to show his good side. I raised my kid right. I did this. I can let him do this, that, and the other. And I was mannerable. I was polite around his peers, people like that. And I got along with everybody. And he did take us to church, or me to church, I should say. And when I was with my mother, we went to church, same thing. But the only thing, all the damage that he was doing was with people in church, and the same thing with her. And now I look at church and I'm saying, it's deja vu. Same thing.
Well, when you say damage, what do you mean?
Everybody he was messing with was in church.
So messing with as in women that he was having an affair with?
Right.
Okay.
Look up in the choir and say, you see all the women in the choir? I said, yeah. I said, I had every one of them. I said, wow. I'm young. I didn't think nothing of it then. But as I got older, he said that to me for real. Like that. But he felt like he could be my friend. And looking back, he can't be your kid's friend. But people say, well, my parent is my best friend. No, I'm not your friend. You got friends in the street. So I'm your dad or your mom, so-and-so like that. That's the way that works. But like you mentioned before about letting kids be themselves. Well, if people had put their foot down before, then we wouldn't have all this movement we have now. Well, I want to be a girl today. No. You're a boy. You were born with a penis. That's what you got. So you can't change that. But these people nowadays will let him do what he wants to do. I disagree totally. And I'll tell him. That's what gets me in trouble because I tell him.
Was your dad the type of guy that would tell him as well?
Yes, he would. He'd speak his mind. Yeah, I think. Yeah, he'd speak his mind. The way he would say it, though, it wouldn't hurt. But it's like he'd just tell you off and okay, keep moving, and then change the subject like he never said anything. But it stuck. Down the road, you look back and think of everything he ever said. So, you know what? That was right. I took this and I left that alone. You pick and choose. That's why I said earlier, he had some good things and some bad things. But I always say I didn't want to be like him. That I didn't want to be.
Well, let me jump back for 1 second, because I think what's interesting, and I'm always talking to men who have had to struggle to get custody of their children. If we go back, I'm assuming this is back in the 50s. How did he get custody of you when, certainly now I forgot what the latest statistics are, but I think it's improved. But even when I was in that situation in the 90s, I think it was still at like 85% of the time the children went with the mom. So when you were growing up, did you know that, the parents that your friends whose parents got divorced, did you know a lot of kids that lived with their father over their mom? And how did you end up being with him? How did that work out? Was the court involved? What was kind of going on around that?
What I can remember, I don't remember any of my friends having divorced parents except me. And I didn't know they were getting divorced, except we went to New York every summer to visit the grandparents. And, we take the train to New York, a bucket of fried chicken and stuff like that, and eat stuff like that on the train, my sister and I. And I went to South Carolina that year also. And then on the way back, I got to New York and I see this yellow and black 53 Oldsmobile outside. And I'm saying, man, that car looks familiar. Come to find out that was my mom's boyfriend, And we got in the car. I thought he was taking us back to Detroit. I woke up and I was out somewhere in the wild blue yonder. Found out we were moving to California. I still had no idea they were going to divorce. And we moved to California. They got married. And me, after that, of course, I found out it wasn't Santa Claus that year also. That hurt. And just knowing that I would never see my father again, that took a toll on me. But I talked to him a couple of times, and it was hard because you had to say, I'd like to make a person-to-person call to so-and-so. Well, she would only let me do it occasionally. But I guess I gave her so much misery, even like running away from home, whereas she came and got me, and I got a whipping all the way back home. But she knew that I wanted to be with my father so bad that she put me on a Greyhound at 11 years old, and I traveled across country back to see my dad, and I never left. That been there since. That was 1958. Wow. Come to find out, down the road, well, I had to go like a referee court also, and the judge asked me where did I want to stay, with my mother and father, and I told him I want to stay with my father because my stepfather gave me spankings, which he did because things that he would tell me to do, and I didn't do it. And looking back, well, I should have done it. But my father told me to tell him all of that, so I told him all of that, and they awarded to where I could stay with my father. Okay. Fast forward, I found out my father, well, he even said it. He only wanted me to keep from paying child support. Well, that hurt. But my mother got him anyway because he wasn't paying for my sister. She kind of put him in jail for a while. And he had to borrow money, get money from Jimmy May, remember that?
Yeah.
Get out of jail, stuff like that. Because I remember Helen getting me out of school, and we took the bus downtown to pay the bail. And to see my dad coming out of jail, that hurt. I mean, I don't even like to think about it now. But to see him coming out of jail, even though for something looking like now is something small as child support, well, to me that was a big deal. Your dad is in jail, man. Wow. So I don't know. I just always thought a lot of him. He was basically my world.
Do you remember how long he had to serve?
And he was in there like a day.
Okay.
Because Helen got him right out.
Okay.
She panicked. Helen couldn't drive or anything, so Richard's in jail. She had to go get him quick.
And just for the sake of the audience, who's Helen?
That was my stepmother. He married her in 1957. After they divorced in 56, he married another woman in 57, which I found out later that was another scam of his. But as my stepmother, it's a toss-up because I was with her. I learned more from her than I did my own mother. And I really had, much love for Helen. And that's the way it is. When she died, she was still Helen. Actually, it hurt me more with Helen than it did my own mother.
I'm really fascinated that you had such a close bond with your father at such a young age, because, I mean, even today, I think we see children generally have a much closer bond with the mom, especially in those early years. So even though he might have said, I just, wanted to get out of child support, it sounds like, at least, those might have been his words, but it almost sounds like his actions dictated that he really initiated a close relationship with you, maybe at least up until that moment. I mean, am I wrong in assuming that? Because most kids don't bond with their dad when you're that young, unless you spend some time with them.
Well, as you know him, he would say that, but then you look back and say, he didn't really mean that. Because he always said I wasn't his kid. You look at him and look at me. I mean, I'm walking down the street and some woman said, you got to be Lindsay's kid. I mean, just like that. And I never saw a woman before in my life. And, we do have pictures. You look at both of us and said, that's it. But I think he was kidding on that one. But to hear him say it at first, it kind of stunned me.
Right.
But looking back, he was just kidding. A lot of things he would say that he wouldn't tell me, but he would tell other people. I found out he wouldn't give me credit, but he'd tell other people that how proud he was. But he'd never tell me that. Mm-hmm. But I knew that he cared about me because really there was nothing that I didn't get that I wanted, really. I mean, all the cars I've had, guess who bought them? Pop. He did. Mm. And like we call him Pop. Well, they call me Pop. They call you Pop. It goes down the line. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Take the name.
He was the original. He was the original Pops.
Yeah, that's it.